Welcome to the Sober Christian Gentleman podcast. This is Henry. I decided to do a podcast on the human rights tribunals in Canada right now because this is one of those situations that the woke leftists have taken power and putting their people in power, and the soldiers of the woke leftists are taking all kinds of positions within government and all the positions that are powerful to actually push their agenda forward. And this is very dangerous to the common man. Most people have no idea. And most of the world doesn't care about Canada because Canada appears to be such a bunch of wimps and sooks and idiots and woke nonsense that what's amazing is generally when you talk to people from around the world, they absolutely have disdain for Canadians. Canadians are just like limp-wristed. I'm going to stop describing it because it's going to get worse. Around the world, the people of Canada have a terrible reputation. The people around the world think Canada is the government of Canada, and it's not. The people of Canada and the government of Canada are two different creatures. The Canadian government has nothing to do with the people of Canada. The government is there as a premise for control, and the people who actually make it to office are never regular people. These are selections that happen, not elections. The point is for control. The point is to promote the woke ideology of the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the Committee of 300. These are the power bases that actually control Canada, and the British Empire never let go of Canada. Canada is a vestige of the British Empire. Most people around the world have no idea. What's amazing is when you talk to people from Canada, they have no idea. They've been swimming in ignorance for so long, they don't even know the difference of what's right or what's correct anymore because they've been so dumbed down by public schools and so abused by the government in every way you could imagine. They're like, the way I would call it an analogy is that the regular Canadian's like an abused housewife that keeps quiet, keeps their head down, does what they're told, and is afraid that if they speak a little bit louder with a little bit of a rough voice, the abuse might get worse, right? And they think, oh, well, it got really bad during COVID. Oh yeah, that was when it was really bad. And boy, we don't want to go back there again. No. So we'll keep quiet and hope everything gets better. It's like the abused housewife thinking like, oh, well, I only get beat twice a week now, but for a little while I was getting beat 4 times a week and that really sucked. But at least we're not at that point anymore. Things let off a little bit. And the people of Canada don't realize they're acting like abused housewives that are all afraid to speak above a whisper regarding the government because they're afraid of the government. But yet they pretend that, this is our government. It is our government. Yeah, they're here for us. It's our government. Oh yeah, they're for us. They're doing their best. And yet they're afraid to speak up because the government might hear them and then destroy them. You see the paradox here? The people of Canada are so downtrodden. It's amazing when you meet them and you speak to them. Like there's many who are awake to what's going on, but they're keeping their heads down so they don't get arrested and incarcerated for life or killed by the government. Since the year 2000, there's legislation on the books that allows the Canadian government to pick up anybody they want. They just have to say that guy's a terrorist. Just say it. That guy's a terrorist, and then a government van full of government baklava people just roll up in the middle of the street, throw a black bag over the guy's head, drag him into the van. He's never seen again. This is happening in Canada, and people have no idea because they think like Canada, they're so soft-spoken and they're so nice people. Oh yeah, they're so nice, and they care about climate change, and it's like, oh, that is not regular people. I mean, you can meet people like that. There's some major brainwashed people in Canada that are actually addicted to the government media, right? They listen to the CBC because they think that is the channel from God. Those people are a lost cause. They will never be redeemed. I don't have any faith in them. They are just waiting to die, waiting for the TV to tell them to get the next booster shot. It's going to put them one foot closer to the grave. I mean, this is amazing. But there's a lot of people in Canada who are not even part of that. They're a totally subset of people who are just trying to be free. They're trying to stay out of the way, to not get killed. And this is why there's not a lot of big protests in Canada, is because the people who know to protest know that to show up in a protest is not going to make any difference, because protests are a tool of the leftist to virtue signal support for a cause. They're not a thing that actually changes the position of the government, unless the government was waiting to have its position changed in the way it wanted to go in the first place. Then they have a big demonstration. The government says, oh, we listen to the will of the people. And, oh, there's this big demonstration. Oh, we're just going to do that. Yeah, more MAID for everybody. Yeah, more medical assistance in dying. Yeah, that's what people really want that. Yeah, people want that. See the demonstration there? Oh, yeah, so we're going to do more of that. Yeah, because that's what people want. But yet, if there's a demonstration for more freedom, the government just ignores that as if it never happened. You know, the big truckers convoy that happened, that was all about pro-freedom, for the government to back off. What'd the government do? Did they back off? No. They actually came in way tyrannical, went way beyond their legal boundaries of jurisdiction of what they're able to do. And then when there's time for accountability, there's never accountability. It's found out that, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that, but no one's going to be held accountable. And, oh, yeah, it was way past your legal mandate. You had no jurisdiction to do that, and you caused a lot of damages, but oh, well, we'll just move on. And then, oh, the damages you caused, oh, yeah, you're not going to pay for that. Don't worry. The people who were damaged, that's just part of the, you don't have to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. Yeah, too bad there. You know, so this is the kind of nonsense going on. So when there's genuine resistance to tyranny, the government ignores it or stomps it down or throws people in jail. Like they either put their agents in the middle of the organization and then arrest them claiming they're terrorists, or they just make stuff up and no one ever knows if it's real or not, because there's so many false flags going on. It's a big mess. Anyways, the whole thing I'm going to talk about in this podcast, the human rights tribunals that have gone so far, they just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And without any accountability, there's not going to be a correction. Without accountability, there will be no correction. Everything will get worse and worse and worse and worse until it gets to a point you can't imagine. And that's the point. That is the direction it's going in at full throttle. And I'm going to explain it in this podcast. Hopefully I'll give you some background to understand what this is all about, so you can wrap your mind around it and really appreciate the depths of the depravity going on. So anyways, on with the podcast. We will begin with an opening prayer. God, give us the patience to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God, give us discernment so we can see with clarity, followed by conviction, to act appropriately at all times and in all things. We ask that you bless us with the armor of God, cloak us with your divine protection, so that we may boldly walk in the world, to courageously be the peacemakers and make the world a better place for all your children. We ask that you move our hearts so that we know when to use the sword of the Spirit or the sword of steel to do right for ourselves, our families, and our communities. We ask that you move us in constitution to be humans who stand tall with courage, speak truth, and lead by example. We pledge on our sacred honor to rebuke evil, to speak out against evil, and to act to stop evil. We ask that you move our hearts so that we may know with absolute certainty the best way for us as individuals to act in our own way. In the power and in the name of Jesus Christ, we banish all negative entities, all evil spirits, all demons from our presence immediately. In the name of Jesus Christ, we command you, we compel you with the power of the Most High God to leave our presence for now and forever. Do not return, go now. In the name of Jesus Christ, we express with our full intention, with our freedom of choice, this area is now declared with the authority of Jesus Christ unequivocally, absolutely, totally clear of all evil entities, spirits, and energies. We say these things in Jesus' name. Amen. I thought I would do a podcast on the downward spiral of the fake country of Canada into the World Economic Forum hellhole that it's becoming worse and worse every day. You have to understand that recently there was an announcement of a $750,000 fine against a man for the crime of believing there's two genders. You know, you heard me correctly. This man believes there's two genders. And because he refuses to say the government imposed line, he is being punished by what's called a human rights tribunal. And you have to understand is that the woke left ideology will not leave you alone. They would rather you die than them recede from their position. And most people are not paying attention to what's going on in Canada because most people don't care about Canada. It's the people of Canada are so downtrodden, it's amazing. They basically all act like abused housewives, where they're afraid to say anything with a raised voice that might be construed as criticism of the government because they could be abused more. Yet in this cycle of violence where they're basically the abused housewife that's beat regular by their abusive husband, in this case, it's the government of Canada that's completely abusing the people of Canada and then getting more and more abusive. Why? Because they get away with it. The government of Canada gets away with abusing the people of Canada. And the people of Canada are so used to being abused that they have a hard time seeing it because it's been so normalized, right? It's like a housewife that's beat regular, and she thinks, well, it's not that bad. It used to be kind of worse, but now it's, at least I only get beat twice a week rather than used to be like 4 times a week. Now it's only twice a week I'm getting beat. It's like better than bad, right? And the people of Canada are in this abusive relationship with the government, where the government abuses the people of Canada. But the government lies to the people of Canada through the control of the media. You have to understand that the media in Canada is paid for by the federal government of Canada. There's almost $1 billion a year spent by the federal government of Canada to pay for the media of Canada. It's not just the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, that is paid for. That one there is paid 90% by the Canadian government. There's only a 10% revenue coming in from vaccine manufacturers and big pharma and things of that nature, and other NGOs that are actually siphoning or laundering money from the government. So you have to appreciate is that the government of Canada gives out grants to these organizations who then give the grants out themselves to other organizations. So there's like hundreds of billions of dollars of Canadian government money being given out every year to what's called NGOs, non-governmental organizations. But these NGOs are turning around and giving the money to other NGOs who are political activists, who are funding the activism going on around Canada. Most of the big demonstrations you see in Canada are actually paid for by the Canadian government, and the funds for that are laundered through 10 different vectors of redirect. So it seems like it's the private sector that's paying for these organizations when it's not. It's actually the federal government who's borrowing money at interest, saying the people of Canada have to pay that back, but the money actually flows for kickbacks and it funds all the left-wing activism. You have to understand is that leftists do not generate anything of value. They have nothing of value to sell. They don't actually create anything. All their ideas suck. They're generally crappy people, and no one wants to be around them unless they're paid to be around them. So these people, the leftists, put their friends in government to make sure that money comes from the government to all the leftist causes. Until you understand this incestuous relationship, it's hard to wrap your mind around what's actually going on. This is actually the situation. So what's going on is like the last 20 years, we've been in the beginning of what's called Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the agenda for the 21st century. It's the United Nations plan that was created back in the 60s and 1960s, and then it was unfolded, right? There's various levels of this plan. It has 10 decades, subsections of the plan. So there's Agenda 21, which is the agenda for the 21st century from the year 2000 to the year 2100. Every 10 years is a decade that has a subset of targets that are trying to be reached by the Agenda 21. So Agenda 2000 was a specific agenda. Agenda 21, then there's Agenda 20, yeah. So Agenda 10 was up till for 10 years from 2010 to 2000 to the year 2010. Then there's another decade, which was year 2010 to 2020, was Agenda 2020. They call it just Agenda 20 for short. And then there's Agenda 30, which is the agenda from the 2020 to 2030. Now, Agenda 2030 has specific markers that they're trying to reach. And they keep trying to make these claims that they're going to remove the ability for manufacturers to actually make carbon-based emissions vehicles. They want to have everything to go electric because electric vehicles are totally controllable at distance, right? Gas-powered vehicles are actually autonomous in many ways, especially the antiques. They're completely analog and can survive even an EMP attack. So they don't want people to have those. They want actually everyone to be on the slave plantation, and they're wanting to push everyone into 15-minute cities. Anyways, the reason why all this matters is that the Agenda 21 has specific goals in mind, and they're trying to meet those goals. How they meet the goals is their creative enterprise. And right now, what's going on in Canada is that there's this whole thing about land claims. What's known as the Crown is the landholder of all of the land in the place called Canada. And no one can tell me exactly what the Crown is because everyone who claims can tell me don't know history and don't actually know what the Crown actually is. They keep thinking they know because they've watched too many TV shows or listened to the government or something. And they don't understand the government lies, cheats, and steals. So why would they tell you the truth about anything? So anyways, this is important because what's going on right now in Canada is that all these American Indian tribes who are woke, right? The woke American Indian tribes are being rewarded for their wokeness. These are the ones that declare Two-Spirit to be a thing, right? So Two-Spirit is the idea that there's two spirits in one body, which is the precursor to transgenderism. So transgenderism is now being rewarded in the American Indian experience by money flooding in and rewards flooding in. You have to understand is that all the American Indian tribes who are staying true to their traditions are not getting money. They're not getting rewards. They may be more punished than they were before, like the abused housewife, right? They get more punished. There's tribes around Canada who do not have a sewer system in there yet. They do not have running water that's clean yet. This is what we're talking about, the systematic abuse of the American Indian tribes for 100, 200 years in Canadian history, where these survivors of the Indian Wars were the... oh man, there's a lot of history here. The French Empire and the English Empire and the Spanish Empire were at war, and they fought over the territories of Canada and what is known today as the United States and the areas of Mexico and all the way down South America. Now, what's amazing is that Spain abandoned North America very early on because there was too much heat going on between the French and the English. It was just not worth the squeeze, right? The juice was not worth the squeeze. So the Spanish just went south and concentrated on south because it seemed like the British didn't care about that for some reason. And the French also didn't care about it. They were too caught up in their tit-for-tat wars in North America. So the Spanish went down and basically took over all of South America, all the way up to Mexico, into New Mexico. That was all Spanish territory. And then what happened was you had what's known today as Canada and United States were these grand lands that were being fought over between the British monarchy and the French monarchy. And there was a point where things, there was the American Indian tribes were recruited to either be on the side of the Spanish or the side of the English or the side of the French. So there'd be these great battles going on, and there'd be the English and the Indians on one side, and the French and the Indians on the other side, and the Spanish and the Indians on another side. And they'd be all fighting. It was a big battle royale going on for a while. And then eventually the Spanish got the hint and basically abandoned the North. When they abandoned the North, all the rest of the American Indian tribes took a side, either the French or the British, right? And then they were fighting for a long time until what happened was the French Revolution happened, in France. When the French Revolution happened in France, that caused everything to change. The entire country's, the concept of the monarchy was dissolved. What was created was called a republic that mirrored the American Revolution that happened in the United States, except it was bastardized into a more of a communist. French Revolution was a communist version of the American Revolution. So when you actually compare the two, they're pretty amazing. So what happened though is once the government became communist in France, it now lost legitimacy and the funding that was used before to keep all this going, right? Because the King of France used the concept of the divine right of kings to claim that God granted him rule over France. He teamed up with the Catholic Church and ran around basically dominating everything he could, collecting taxes, giving kickbacks to the church and all kinds of stuff, right? Very incestuous relationship there. But once the nobility of France were overthrown and people had an opportunity to get revenge for all the evil that happened at the hands of the nobility, the guillotines never stopped for years. And I think there was like 40,000 people who all were beheaded. Most of the nobility who did not realize what was going on, who didn't leave, right? The ones who stayed got killed. The ones who fled with all their wealth and then came back later on. They creeped back in. But the ones who didn't leave right away were all killed in France. Now, during this big bloodletting going on, things were very confusing, and the last thing people gave two hoots about was territorial disputes in North America, which is another continent away. So the entire the French English wars just kind of evaporated overnight. See how that worked? It's just like now there's no longer these two entities fighting for ego and dominance and treasure. It's just changed gears. So what happened was the French abandoned North America. And then the Napoleonic Wars brought another element that's important to understand when it comes down to the United States. So in the United States, there was still a big French area that is known today as New Orleans. Now this area actually ended up getting sold from France to the new American colony, the new America, right? So when it was colonies, it was the French colonies versus the British colonies. And then the American Revolution happened, and there's this thing called America, where there was the 13 colonies that became the first 13 states. They were part of the original Federation. And then within 13 years, they became the Republic of the United States of America, 13 colonies. But right in the middle of the colonies was this thing that was French, French territories. Now, during the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon needed money. So he basically sold the lands that are known today as New Orleans, that whole area, to the new American 13, the American Republic. So Napoleon cashed out for gold those territories to America. And from that point forth, it was all America, and France was gone. Napoleonic Wars went the way it did. It was a complete disaster, if you think of it in a humanitarian point of view, but as a land clearing / depopulation event for the aristocracy to get back at the regular population, it worked spectacularly. The aristocracy destroyed the French population. What's amazing is when you start studying the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon had this weird fixation about putting tall guys at the front lines. Everyone who was tall was put in the front lines. They all died right away. It was one of the most weird genetic engineering things done in a short period of time, where all the tall guys were put to the front lines and killed systematically. Everyone. It was like if you're the tallest guys went to the front and they're all killed. What happened was all the survivors of the Napoleonic War were all like 5'5" or lower. And that's the population of France actually got shorter from the Napoleonic Wars because of this fixation by Napoleon. And what's interesting is you have to understand is that the aristocracy were getting their revenge by actually killing off all the tall people, because there's this joke amongst the aristocracy that the little people are the peasants, and the aristocracy tower above them. Why? Because if you're an aristocrat, you have a full diet of all the calories you need to actually grow up to your full development potential. People who are on the edge of starvation cannot develop to their full height or width or capacity. So children who are starved perpetually will never actually hit their full height. Starving children will actually be short. The more starvation and famine that happens, the shorter the population is, because their bodies are trying to efficiently use calories, and if you don't have the extra calories, you're not going to grow up with the growth spurts that would normally have put you high and tall. See how that works? Anyway, it's important to understand this stuff because it's all relevant. Now, there's a war, a genetic war going on all the time. The aristocracy understand these concepts and they use it to demean their enemies, which is the regular population. This is how they operate. So anyways, how this matters in Canada is that in Canada now, all the woke American Indian tribes who are actually taking the knee to the two-spirit concept, which is transgenderism, are being rewarded with successes in court and monetary settlements. Out of nowhere, the federal government started handing out money to woke American Indian tribes, but only the ones who promote transgenderism, right? That was like step one. And then now they have to go further, which means embracing the climate change. So the woke climate change stuff is the next phase of the loyalty test. If you embrace that stuff, you will be rewarded with lands. Why? Because these people, the woke American Indians, do not understand that they are being recruited to be the foot soldiers for the Agenda 21 program of rewilding the wilderness. What's going on is I have a whole different podcast series on this American Indian deception where they're basically using the American Indians to displace regular people on the land, because the idea is that the crown will never give up superior title on the land, but they'll put the woke American Indians below the crown and allow the woke American Indians to actually push everybody off the land. At first, people are going to be allowed to stay if they pay taxes to the local municipality and pay taxes to the American Indians. If you don't pay, you get kicked off. This is what's going to happen. They're already talking about, there's already white papers coming out explaining this process. There's like these woke American Indians who are these communists who are basically saying, hey, don't hesitate, to my woke American comrades, do this now. Basically set up a schedule where people can pay to stay or they're kicked off. And eventually, there's a period of time where people are going to be able to pay to stay, and then eventually they're just going to get kicked off, because the idea is that the land of North America is going to be cleared so that's 95% wild. No one there, and to be there is going to be a death sentence. People didn't understand how that was going to be possible before, because how do you make it an instant death sentence? You just don't have, how do you have the people to enforce no people in a certain area? And the idea now that's finally come to in focus is AI and robots. The robots are being developed to be able to patrol the wilderness. If anything alive that fits the human profile is there, it'll be killed on the spot instantly. No trial, no pleading, no talking your way through. You're just killed instantly by the killer robots that are being developed right now by Elon Musk and the Communist Chinese and all these different firms that are developing it right now. So what's going on is the American Indians are being used to come in to give the premise for a legal the legal premise to be able to start land clearing people off, and the land clear areas maps are going to start getting bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually there's nowhere left to legally reside in the place called Canada, except what's magically going to be ready for them called 15-minute cities, where everything you need was going to be in a 15-minute radius. It's going to be skyscrapers that have 3 levels of commercial enterprise on the first 3 levels, and then the floors 4 to 6 are going to be office space, and then floors 7 to 180 is going to be residential stack and pack housing, where you're going to have like a 10 square foot micro home to reside in, basically a prison cell, but it's not going to be called that. And this is the plan. What you have to understand is this is the plan. So in the plan of like getting to that point, there's a lot of steps in between, and the steps in between, one of the things Canada did 20 years ago now was as soon as Agenda 21 kicked off around the year 2000, Canada started doing all these different moves that looked like one thing when it was another. Like as an example, when 9/11 happened, which is a false flag event, basically the United States military created an event whereby they attacked themselves and then made it seem like there was these foreign attackers attacked America, and the only solution to the terrorist threat was that everyone in America was considered a terrorist. And what was created was the what's called the Patriot Act, which was a 10,000-page document that was created years in advance. They were waiting for the event to be able to launch the Patriot Act. When they launched the Patriot Act, it turned America's military and intelligence apparatus legally inward to be able to spy on Americans everywhere all the time. And this began the tyranny of America. This happened right after the year 2000. You have to appreciate, Agenda 21 is the year 2000 to 2100. Right after the year 2000, 2001 is when the 9/11 happened. And this gave a premise not just in America, but for every other Western country. We're talking about England, Australia, Canada, now enacted legislation that made it possible to pick up terrorists without trial. You have to understand that Canada right now has legislation still on the books where if they actually just point to you and say you're a terrorist, the government agents can come and just pick you up, throw a bag over your head, throw you in a van, and you're never seen again. They can do anything they want to because you're now considered a terrorist, which is subhuman according to the laws that are already on the books. And they can torture you if they want to. They can organ harvest you if they want. They can put you in a psychological program, turn you into a super soldier. They can experiment on you, cut parts off of you, implant stuff into you. I mean, there's no limit to what the Canadian government can do to someone who is just pointed at. They just point to you and say, that guy is a suspected terrorist. And then boom, you have no rights. And you get the black bag over the head, thrown into a van, you're never seen again. This is happening in Canada. There's a bunch of instances of this happening in Canada, and they're just mysterious. Why? Because the people who have the resources to investigate are told to leave it alone. The people who actually are interested in it are told, if you keep going along, it's going to happen to you too. If you keep trying to reveal this, it's going to happen to you too. So for a while on the internet, there's all kinds of chatter going on about these kind of events going on, people just disappearing. And the difference though was that before 9/11, people didn't disappear like this. There's a different qualities to the disappearances. It seemed like the disappearance that happened before 9/11 was organized crime. Right, so organized crime would actually do it, but after 9/11, it was actually the government doing it, or just getting rid of political enemies. And there's all kinds of things that happened that were just amazing. And then these courts were created by the government of Canada. They were called human rights tribunals. You have to appreciate is that you have these woke left activists that will lie, cheat, and steal to achieve their goals, which is political dominance. So these are people who have no relevance. They have no reference points to reality because they'll say anything and do anything to gain power. These political activists who proved their stripes, as in they will just go forward, they'll say anything and do anything to gain power. These are the people. This is like the psychopath recruiting event that happened for a period of time on the internet, where there's these like just crazy, bloodthirsty lunatics running around pushing woke ideology before the word woke was even defined yet. The first waves was like the feminist lunatics running around accusing every man of being a rapist or whatever just to try to ruin their life. And that wasn't enough, because what happened was in regular courts, if a woke left activist feminist accuses a man of being a rapist, she actually has to show up. There has to be a trial in the regular court in Canada where the guy gets to face his accuser, because the jurisprudence going back all the way back to England for 1,000 years is that there's a system in place for the courts in Canada. So if someone accuses you of a crime, you have a right to face your accuser and a right to actually be presumed innocent until proven guilty. And during the trial, you get to actually destroy their claims against you. What's amazing is in criminal court, you don't have to prove you're innocent, because that's impossible. The prosecutors have to prove you're guilty, because if you're guilty, they can prove it. If you're innocent, they can't prove you're guilty. if things are operating correctly, right? See how that works? There's these rules on evidence of what's admissible, what's not admissible. I have different podcasts explaining a lot of the court stuff if you're not really familiar with this, because it's a very complex thing that has a lot of history to it. I have a podcast on judges, a podcast on trust, a podcast on lawyers, a podcast on the history of the legal system in Canada and the United States and England, because it's all relevant. Now, what's important is when you start understanding that there's an actual a pattern of conduct that must be adhered to for the legitimacy of the courts in Canada to maintain the legitimacy, as in the faith of the public to believe that they're real. If they deviate too much from the rules, then people will realize these courts are illegitimate and just abandon the courts. So to hold on to the structure of power, which is the court system in Canada, is a release valve. So whenever the people of Canada get fed up with the federal government for being tyrannical and evil, the people have a release valve called the court system, and people are encouraged to go to court to resolve their differences peacefully, right? The idea is that, if physical protests don't resolve it, then sue the government and then you'll get a peaceful resolution of your issues. Now, this is a false premise. You will never actually curtail the government's behavior if the government is behaving according to the wishes of the globalist power structure that is actually controlling the federal government. The government of Canada is a theater. It's a theater of the absurd that's meant to make people believe that they have some sort of control over their fate, so they don't just actually overthrow the government, which they is a logical conclusion that you get to if you realize that, wait a second, I have no hope of freedom unless I overthrow the government. Then people come to that conclusion and they start acting in that way. So to avoid it, people having that thought, there's the political spectrum that leads people off and totally distracts them. Then there's the protest sphere that totally leads people off and exhausts them. And then the third level of protecting the government is a thing called the courts. Now, if you ever try to sue the courts to do anything to curtail their behavior, you'll never succeed. But the process of trying to succeed will exhaust you physically, it'll exhaust you emotionally, it will financially destroy you, and you'll never actually find resolution. By the time you get there, you'll be so downtrodden and beaten down that you won't even want to talk about it. You won't even want to write a book about it because you're so tired of it. You just want to move on in life. And that's the point. These three levels that I just described, the political labyrinth, then there's the protest labyrinth, and then there's the lawsuit labyrinth. All three are circles within circles that are meant to exhaust you, so you never actually change the power structure of the government. And that is the point. The powerful maintain power because they're hiding behind the premise of a government that they claim is legitimate, but it's not. And whenever you start looking close enough, you can find it's illegitimate at every point. But to try to do anything about it, you're pushed down these three paths: either the political path, which is useless, the protest path, which is useless, or the suing path in the courts, which is useless. What's amazing is that these people, even though this is true, what I just explained, that's not enough for them. They had to create another thing called the human rights tribunals. And the reason why is because all these woke feminists who are trying to sue, falsely accuse guys of raping them or whatever, and it was just completely not true. It's just that these women believed they had a moral imperative to destroy their political enemy, so anything they said was justified. Even falsely accusing some poor guy of raping them was totally justified in the grand scheme of trying to settle the score between the patriarchy and all this stuff, all these ideas they have in this imagination in their head that was imprinted on them by going to university. Most university people come out of university with woke ideology and don't realize that they've been brainwashed in a death cult, and they barely survived. And then from that point on, they're fulfilling their programming and don't really know why. Now, so you have to appreciate is that the woke feminists were not able to succeed in court to destroy people because in courts, there's actually generally rules of conduct and the rules of court, and there's rules of evidence, and there's precedents and all stuff. So they were not succeeding to actually fully destroy their political enemies, even though these guys were falsely accused, and then they're able to beat the false accusation. And once a man beats the false accusation, they can move on in life, even though only 20% of the society will actually accept them back in. 80% will always believe the guy was actually guilty. He just was able to get the funds to pay a sneaky lawyer to get him off with the charge. This is the way the culture of Canada and the West in general believes that if a guy is accused of rape, he's guilty. Even if he gets away, even if he's found to be innocent, it means that he just paid a lawyer a lot of money did some tricky stuff and he got off with it. 80% of people think that if you're accused of rape in the West, that you did it, whether you're found guilty or not. And this is how the system works in layers of corruption and layers of propaganda to just destroy people, destroy the political enemies of the leftists. This is the point. We're in a war, and most people have no idea we're in the middle of the war. So what ended up happening was this situation that is totally unjust, where someone could actually appear in court on their own defense and defend themselves against these false charges because they were ridiculous, and they were often able to actually just prove how ridiculous it was and be able to get a not guilty verdict against them and move on in life without going to jail. This was not good enough for the woke left activists. So the woke left activists got their friends, the woke left politicians, to create woke left legislation that was on a different premise. And they created this thing called the Human Rights Tribunals in Canada. And since these things called the Human Rights Tribunals in Canada have been enacted, it is one of the most egregious injustices ever perpetrated on mankind. So far, like what's coming is even worse, because they're actually pushing the Noahide laws, which are going to make it a death sentence for being an enemy of the leftists. But right now we have this in-between point called the Human Rights Tribunals. In the Human Rights Tribunals, there's no rules of evidence that normally apply in a courtroom. Also, so you have to understand that they appreciate the scenario. Like this guy just got a fine of $750,000 for claiming there's two genders, which is objectively a fact. But the facts don't matter in human rights tribunals because these are woke left courts that are not courts at all. The judges, who is the judge, is a woke left activist. These are not people who came from, they're not even lawyers who went into this. They're not even judges who went over to this. These are just woke left activists who are there to promote and to enforce the woke left ideology. These are dangerous people, and they're the individuals that are deciding the fate of individuals who are brought in front of them. And what's amazing is Canada has made the premise that, there's the patriarchy and all men are dangerous, and anyone who's an enemy of the left is a danger because they're probably like a terrorist, a closet terrorist, because if they're conservative, they're a terrorist. If they want to be free of government, they're a terrorist. If they don't know what the government tells them, they're a terrorist, right? This is the kind of nonsense that's going on. So what ends up happening is to protect the accusers, right? So someone who's a woke left activist in the wild will accuse one of their political enemies, and they make an accusation to the Human Rights Tribunal. This accusation is picked up by a prosecutor, a professional prosecutor who is paid for by the federal government. This prosecutor will take the accusation made by the political activists, and then the identity of the political activist is hidden from that point forward. You're not allowed to know who accused you in these human rights tribunals because they claim that, oh no, it's just too dangerous. Oh no, their life might be in danger if the accused finds out who the accuser was. Oh, the accuser might be in danger. Oh, they might get killed by the terrorist, right? It might be a conservative. I mean, a Christian even. A Christian might come kill them, right? This is the kind of nonsense. The woke left activists have created a complete parallel reality that is totally untethered to reality, but they believe it and they promote it as if it's real. That everyone who is a straight white Christian is a killer waiting for an opportunity, and this is the kind of nonsense going on. So to pretend and keep this pretense going, the identity of the accuser is kept secret. So the tribunal is enacted, the accuser is hidden, and now there's a professional prosecutor that's gathering evidence based on whatever special things they do there. And now they accuse the individual who's the target of being having violated some sort of human rights code. And these codes are like vague. I mean, this is like they can accuse you of almost anything and you cannot get out of it because they don't have clear definitions of anything. So how do you prove yourself innocent of a thing when you can't even define the thing you're being accused of? And then on top of that, you don't know who your accuser is, and you're being accused of all kinds of vague crimes that are not even crimes. They're like thought crimes, not real crimes. We're in like pretend court here, but the consequences are real. And just to make it even worse, you're not allowed to defend yourself in these human rights tribunals. You cannot present yourself on your own defense. No, you have to hire a lawyer and pay for that lawyer. So what this sets up is a situation where, as you're being dragged through this human rights tribunal, you have to have a lawyer being paid by the hour to defend yourself against these nonsensical claims. The lawyer can't actually defend you, but he's getting paid by the hour to do so, and you have to pay him. So what happens is the process is the punishment. Even if you're totally innocent, but it doesn't matter you're totally innocent. You have no chance of really defending yourself because you don't know who your accuser is. You're not even sure what the actual crime you're being accused of. And even if you knew what it was, it's not even a crime. It's just a hurt someone's feelings kind of thing. And this is the insanity going on. And then plus you're paying a lawyer by the hour to defend yourself against the indefensible. You can't defend yourself under these conditions. It's completely insane. And that's the point. The point is that you pay by the hour for a lawyer to keep you out of jail. And if you stop paying the lawyer to keep you out of jail, you go to jail. And it's like as simple as that. It's like, how do you stay out of jail? You keep paying a lawyer to keep you out of jail. And this is where people, so far, there's been several cases where people have paid $100,000, $300,000, $500,000 to a lawyer just to keep out of jail against accusations that are ridiculous, that are insane, but they're just trying to keep their butt out of jail. So they're paying and paying and paying. And the process is the punishment. This is how evil it is. Oh, it's just so evil. So this is how the situation went from A to B. So these woke left activists who are now in the position of having absolute power to ruin the lives of their political enemies are being empowered by the federal government of Canada to actually pursue this goal. And what's amazing is that the woke left government of Canada and the woke left activists, their priorities align, their world vision align. You have to understand, this is, if a woke left activist, a tribunal could just destroy someone who's an activist who's trying just to like be free of the federal government, just to live free, just to be left alone. Well, that's an enemy of the state. So if the woke left activist can attack that person, then it's a win-win for the state because the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And what's amazing is in this concept, the woke left activists and the government are the same. They're not even enemies. They're actually working in the same playbook. They're actually just two faces of the same beast that have the same goal in mind, which is to push the woke left activism, to rewild the lands, to depopulate the earth for mommy earth. And all of this is all based on false premises. The idea the earth is overpopulated is false. The idea that carbon-based, man-made carbon-based emissions are a problem is false. It's lies on top of lies on top of lies. When you give these woke left activists power, the expected happens. They abuse that power. See, the problem is that the regular people of Canada have this presumption of credibility for the government. They think that the government is a legitimate organization that has legitimate goals and it's operating on behalf of the people for the people's best interests. And none of that is true. And what's amazing is when you try to actually explain this to a regular normie who's totally asleep, they can't believe it because the truth of it is so profound that the implications mean dire consequences for them, and they'd rather believe the lie and feel comfortable while they're going to die rather than believe the truth and start acting to preserve themselves, which could get uncomfortable because not only are they going to have to deal with the reality that the government is a murderous organization looking to kill them and their family and their entire community, to depopulate Canada by 95%. That means 9,500 people are going to be dead. That's a lot of death. And what's amazing is when you start talking to people who are in normie land, they don't want to go there. The reason why is that to go there means they have to accept reality, which is very uncomfortable. Is that they've lived a lie, they've been lied to by the government and the media, they were told that things were safe and effective when they weren't, they're actually dying because they got injected with a murder weapon that the government told them to get. So many people got it under duress, as in they were going to lose their job, and they thought, getting a jab to keep my job is no big deal since the government told me it was safe and effective. Turns out it was neither safe, neither effective. It can't be effective. It can't be effective vaccination against the non-existent viruses because viruses don't exist. As in general, there's never been one virus ever in history proven to exist. So it's impossible for a vaccine to work against a virus that does not exist. It's just impossible. So you need A before B. It works, right? A logic loop. You need A before B. To have a vaccine against a virus, you need to have a virus to have a vaccine against. If there's no virus, there's no vaccine, right? What you're getting is just injected with toxic soup of nonsense that makes you sick. Now, what's amazing is that this whole situation is such that the government has been caught injecting people with 9, I think for a period of time, it was 9 out of 10 shots in people's arms were actually saline solution. And the reason why is because the saline solution was used to hide the fact that the injection was so toxic. If they actually injected everybody who lined up for the COVID shots, there'd be so much death, it'd be so obvious, right? There'd be ambulance after ambulance at the injection site with people just dead, that it would have discouraged people from lining up to get the shot in the arm. So to hide the fact that the shot is toxic and will kill you, the government actually made 1 out of 10 of the injections actually live shot. And then 9 out of 10 were saline solution. Saline is just salt water. So they used this premise of only giving 1 out of 10 shots actually live, which started the die-off. It mitigated the effects, so people couldn't tell right away what was going on, because 9 out of 10 people who got the shot said, "Oh, I feel fine. I had no negative side effects at all." Anyone claiming the shot is a negative is lying. And because their perspective, they got a saline solution shot that the government told them was a real live COVID shot, and they didn't know the difference. And then they started running around attacking everyone, saying that the COVID shots were actually going to harm you, because they said, "Oh, I feel fine." And then the problem was that wasn't the only shot they were going to get, and the government knew it. They came in for their second shot, and then their booster, and then the booster after that booster, and the booster after that, until eventually they got the live one. Once they got the live one, that's when their health fell apart. That's when the bottom fell out of this thing and they started dying. And then as they went to the hospital to find out what's going on, the doctor said, anything is happening except the shot, right? Anything but the shot is the reason for you to be dying right now, right? Could be climate change. Yeah, climate change is likely what's going on. Yeah, that's why you're dying. That's why your heart is giving out. That's why you're having these clots in your vascular system that is causing you to need amputations and things like that. Don't worry. We got prescriptions and more prescriptions on top of prescriptions and prescriptions on top of those prescriptions, because there's side effects from the other prescriptions. And don't worry, we got you covered. And there's a mass die-off going on right now. And this mass die-off going on right now is never being there's never accountability for it. Why? Because the only evidence allowed in court when people are suing the government of Canada for killing the population is that the court procedure is never fair. Why? Because the only evidence allowed by the government to be heard in the government courts is pro-government propaganda. It's false studies that are fraudulent that claim the shot is safe and effective and claim that there's a benefit to it, and the benefit far outweighs the risk. And even if they admit that there's some sort of downside, the downside is so minuscule it doesn't matter, and it's better for everyone just to take it. Why? Because only the woke left activist doctors are allowed to make the woke left activist pharmaceutical studies that promote the government line. Because you have to understand is that the courts in Canada only allow government-friendly evidence to be admissible in court. So with the COVID shots, every single lawsuit has failed so far. Why? Because the government makes sure that the government courts that are paid for by the government do not allow the evidence that actually destroys the narrative of the government. So in the courts are saying that, oh, well, we can only allow acceptable evidence from experts. The thing is, the only acceptable evidence from experts are experts that are pro-government experts. Anyone who's telling the truth is considered not an expert, right? They're just they're disentitled from testifying because they're not an expert. Why? Because the government did not endorse their expertise. Therefore, they're not an expert and they cannot testify in the court case. This is a regular court. I'm not talking about the tribunals, which are insane. I'm talking about the regular court, which is one level of insanity and total manipulation, right? So what happens is these court cases go through, the government makes sure the government courts do not allow any evidence that actually would qualify to destroy the narrative being created by the murderous depopulation government. So the only experts allowed to testify are experts that are pro-government experts. And then what happens is that the case resolves itself, and the only evidence that was allowed is pro-government, pro-lies evidence, and there's nothing to counter it, because all the evidence that counters it is dismissed or rejected or censored, right? So even though anyone with a computer today could actually amass enough evidence to actually successfully sue the government for depopulation, because these shots kill everything they're injected with, right? And this is known. I've done other podcasts on that where I've actually shown that the mRNA injections have been experimented on for 20 years, and all the animal studies show that all the animals die within 5 years of being injected with the mRNA injection. And the thing is that even though there's no such thing as viruses, what is real is the toxicity of these injections actually kill the animals because it destroys their system. It makes the animals so toxic that they get organ failure. Their organs just started failing. Their liver fails. Organ by organ fails until they die. Their heart might give out. Their lungs might give out. They might get clots, mysterious clots that just plug everything up, and then they die. They get aneurysms and heart attacks from the clots. And these are not blood clots. People have actually examined the clots coming from the COVID shots, and they're actually not blood clots. They're actually something else. It's an actual, a new thing that's never been seen before. It's these big white fibrous clots that are actually made of material that's not actually blood. It's another material. Now, what's important to understand is that if regular courts are this far off, as in you cannot actually get an actual fair day in court to be able to produce the evidence to actually reel in a homicidal government, I mean, what kind of justice do you expect in the woke left courts that are the human rights tribunals where there's the regular rules of evidence don't even apply? It's a next level insanity. And it's going to get worse from here because whenever you see these big decisions like $750,000 against a guy who is asserting that there's two genders, that's an absolute truth that's provable, and everyone knew it until a minute ago, right? You see, what's important to the powerful is that you obey what they say. You repeat what they say or you'll be punished. They don't care what the truth is. And the government is revealing its stripes as we go forward. The government is revealing that it's not there for the people, by the people, for the best interest of the people. It's there for the powerful to maintain power and to achieve the agendas of the powerful. I mean, this is a thing that's really important to understand. The powerful are all signed in to the depopulation agenda of reducing the population of Canada by 95%. They need to land clear. So step by step, the laws are being put on the books. The government of Canada is making big sweeping moves that are setting up for the big land clearing events that are going to be coming up. Everyone's going to be pushing the 15-minute cities. What's important about these human rights tribunals is that this is the tester, right, to see what kind of pushback happens. If people rose up in mass against the government was back off and shut down these human rights tribunals, or try to propagandize them, or settle them down a little bit, or just have them act more sensibly. But because there's only a few people at a time that are being dragged into these human rights tribunals and having their lives destroyed, and the people that have their lives destroyed tend to be people who are kind of loners, right? They're individuals who are not connected to any particular group, and that's why they're easily separated from the herd and they're easily attacked. And most of these people who are being dragged in front of the human rights tribunals are not activists. They have no idea what to expect, don't know what's going on. They're relying on objective reality to save them, and they don't appreciate the people who are being dragged in front of these human rights tribunals don't appreciate they're in an area where truth is not relevant. This is the thing that's hard for them to wrap their minds around. They're in an area that is a parallel reality where feelings are more important than facts, and obeying the authorities is more important than actually upholding your God-given right of being a free man or woman. See, people have a hard time just, living through a dystopian movie, but their life is the movie. Dystopia has enveloped them, and they just can't accept it because they can't believe it's true. I mean, it's just too evil. It's too dark for it to actually be true and to be happening to them. This is the thing that's important for people to understand. The individuals that are dragged in front of these human rights tribunals usually have no idea what they're up against because few people are actually talking about these human rights tribunals and the complete travesty of justice that's been going on since they've been enacted. And when you follow some of these cases, I mean, there was one guy who was just simply trying to save his daughter. What was going on is that his daughter was brought into public schools, and a certain group of public school teachers and counselors and things like that were grooming his daughter to claim she was a boy, I think it was. Yeah, so this grooming gang was trying to promote this idea that this child was in the wrong body. The father was trying to save the child from the from the mutilations that were going to be coming by the sex surgery stuff and the puberty blockers and all the different things. And what's amazing is it doesn't matter how much evidence you have that puberty blockers actually destroy children and will kill them eventually. It doesn't matter because the government only allows evidence that supports the government position that puberty blockers are fantastic, totally reversible, safe, and effective, which are all lies. Whenever you give puberty blockers to a child who's developing through puberty, it destroys their ability to become fully formed adults. It actually sterilizes the children. This is known now that this has actually sterilized the children so they can never have babies, which is great for the depopulation program, but terrible for the individual that does not know that this is the consequence of receiving these drugs. And what's amazing is all the activists that are pushing this transgender stuff, many of them know this truth that these children will be sterilized, but the movement is more important than the individuals. And they say things like you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, which means that it's okay if tens of thousands, if not millions of children are destroyed and their lives are destroyed to bring in the utopia of transgenderism as the most important thing, right? They don't mind destroying children to bring in the ideology. This is what people have a hard time comprehending. To appreciate the evil here, it takes a lot of education to realize how evil this actually is. I've done other podcasts on the transgender deception, how it's well known that these poor children will be destroyed, and many of them commit suicide because once they realize the repercussions, right? Once they fully develop as a mature adult, as in when children go through puberty, they get all kinds of confusions about all kinds of stuff because they got crazy hormones going on. But if they have hormone blockers, it throws the whole series of steps to develop into a fully formed human out of whack, so they never actually fully form. And by the time they actually become adults, say 20 to 25, and they realize that they're now fully through that process and now they're sterile, and they realize they've been lied to, and they may or may not have had reconstructive surgery that had cut their penis and testicles off, or they had their breasts cut off, or they had hysterectomy. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen that to these poor children that makes irreversible. It's not reversible to do these surgeries on these poor children. And even before the surgeries, just the hormone blockers makes them sterile. Like, it is so evil. Evil, evil, evil. And these human rights tribunals are pushing transgenderism as the best thing possible, and anyone that gets in the way of transgenderism needs to be destroyed. And one of the foundational elements of transgenderism is that there's more than two sexes. And what's amazing is that if there's more than two sexes, why are you bothering to do these gender-affirming care? See how it's interesting how they say, oh, well, there's unlimited amount of genders. Yeah, you can just be anything you want to be. You can be queer gender, and there's these other genders that are just changing all the time, and every other hour it's a different gender. This is the kind of nonsense that they're promoting. And then what's amazing, though, is that gender-affirming care is never affirming someone's biological sex, as in you're born a boy. You have an outie, you're a boy. That's simple. You have an innie, you're a girl, right? Gender affirming would be, hey, you're a boy, you stay a boy. If you're a girl, you stay a girl. That's gender affirming. But no. Gender affirming care means you reverse the genetic gender of the individual, mutilate the body, destroy the child, and make sure they're never able to actually procreate. They're sterile from that point forward. How is that gender affirming or care? Those three words are used to mix up people, to make them not understand how evil this whole thing is. It's evil beyond evil. And until you understand the grasp of the depth of this evilness, it's hard to appreciate how much this movement needs to be opposed. And most people have no idea. They have no idea why to oppose it and why it's not harmless. What's important for people to understand is that this woke ideology is not a organic experience. It is created by individuals who want to reduce the population. Right? So these are control freaks who want to reduce the population by 95%. And to reduce the population requires multiple things. This is why woke has one objective in mind, which is depopulation. You don't see it at first unless it's explained to you. You have to understand is that sexual perversion does not produce children. See how that works? See, regular intercourse between a man and a woman produces children, if both the man and the woman are healthy. But if either the man or the woman is toxic to the point of dying, then they're not going to produce children. You have to appreciate that the drug culture that's promoted in Hollywood, and the government promotes drug culture because what's going on, right? What are the things that are totally legal by the government? Well, now alcohol is legal. Buying drugs is legal. Pharmaceutical drugs has been legal for a long time. And then buying marijuana products through the government dispensaries is totally legal. But those government pot products are completely toxic. And unless you actually have any understanding of the history of marijuana growing operations, when it's actually grown by people in their backyards, all organic, there's a certain amount of toxicity there, but it's a chemical thing, not a additive. So, but the thing is that if people grow marijuana at an industrial scale for the government, this is where big agriculture gets involved and starts selling herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, and the product is completely toxic. It's a completely toxic product. So people who smoke weed from a government dispensary are just poisoning themselves. They're making their body toxic. And then if you buy alcohol, that also makes your body toxic. And then if you're on prescription drugs, which most people are, you're even more toxic. People that are wide open on drugs who don't even realize it, right? It's been so normalized by the media, the government, the TV, their doctors, that just, having 20 prescriptions is normal these days. But people on prescriptions, every one of those prescriptions is a toxin. You have to understand, the only thing being sold by the pharmaceutical companies are toxins that have been repackaged as something else. They take industrial waste that normally you'd have to pay for it to be disposed of because it's toxic soup. They'll repurpose it, repackage it, and sell it to you as a drug. Toxic waste. And people just have no idea because they've never been allowed to have an idea. Why? Because the government is killing the population and does not want you to know to avoid being killed. Because the point of the operation is to kill you while they're subduing you and taxing you, controlling you. I mean, this is the deal. So just the one aspect of the drug idea, right? So people are so toxic with drugs, and then people who don't eat are not conscious of what they're eating, or eating toxic food. So they're taking toxic drugs, eating toxic food, not drinking clean water, and God help them if they're drinking tap water that's full of chlorine and fluoride. I mean, this is just insanity, right? And that's the point, is that most people have no idea that they're engaged in insanity, and they don't realize what's going on with them. So they're so toxic. So you take a man and a woman who are just regular man and woman, they come together, they can't even make a baby because their both bodies are so toxic. The guy does not produce sperm that's viable, and the woman is not, her body is so toxic that her body won't allow her to make a baby. It's just not possible. Why? Because she's so toxic that if she tried to actually go through a 9 months of pregnancy, the baby would die. That's how toxic the woman's body is. And we're talking about culture now that induces toxicity, that physically manifests in toxicity. Most women are so toxic today that they're sterile and don't even know it. Yet they're running around taking the pill and taking all these different, using condoms everywhere, thinking that they need to do that or they're going to get pregnant, and they don't have no idea that they're actually sterile right now. They're infertile. Have a different podcast on how to reverse infertility, because it's so simple. When you reverse the toxicity, women become fertile again and they can have babies. A woman's body will not allow her to have a baby if the baby's going to die from the pregnancy, because the pregnancy could kill the woman as well. This is simple. So the woke ideology is promoting the idea of depopulation because of climate change and all that nonsense. So the climate change insanity is a death cult that wants to reduce the population of the earth. And everything they do promotes things that reduces the population. If you can get a local population to stop making babies, that population will die off, right? So if you take the concept of an island, right? You take an island, you put 100 homosexual men on the island. Come back 100 years ago, you know what you find? 100 skeletons, right? They're all dead. This is a self-deleting process. Same thing for lesbians. So you take homosexual women that are called lesbians, put them on an island, come back 100 years later, you have 100 skeletons because they're all dead. This is, see how simple this is? This analogy helps make it clear what's going on. You put 100 toxic people on an island that are mixed, between the sexes, and they're not even going to make babies because both the men and the women are so toxic they cannot get pregnant. On top of that, most of the activities they're going to engage in, if they're sexual perverts, will not produce babies. They'll spend all their time chasing pleasure and never chasing pregnancy. Therefore, another island full of 100 skeletons. Doesn't matter that they're mixed genders, one's male, one's female. Doesn't matter because they're too busy chasing pleasure and never actually having a baby. On top of that, they're so toxic that the men do not produce viable sperm, and the women will not be allowed. Their own bodies will not allow them to go to full-term pregnancy because it'll kill both the child and themselves. So you see how simple this is? So all the woke ideology pushing promiscuity, pushing sexual perversion, pushing drug use and alcohol abuse and pharmaceuticals. See how this works? Everything being pushed by the wokeness is about self-deleting. It's about people choosing to engage in activities that make them self-delete out of the gene pool and celebrating it while they're doing it. And the government protects their choice to do that. I mean, it's crazy. But it's dressed up in propaganda to seem like it's something else. So everything woke is suicide. Most people just can't see it because they don't see it on a long enough timeline. They only see it in a short bit. They don't see the long-term prospects. It's amazing. And this is the point. The point is deception. Deception, deception, deception. It's always about pretending it's something it's not, trying to entice you into something that seems like it's going to be rewarding on the short term, never thinking about the long term. And then when the short term reward does not turn out to be as advertised, you chase it again rather than realizing it was a lie. There's people on this loop of chasing sexual pleasure because they think, well, it just didn't work out the last time. It didn't. I just thought it was going to be better and it wasn't. And I thought the next time it was going to be better and it wasn't. And the next time. 1,000 people later, they're still chasing it, thinking they just didn't do it right. The whole point of the deception is to actually cause someone to be dead inside and unable to connect to anyone else in a meaningful way. And that is the point of the operation. Until you realize that, it's hard to see what's going on with the big picture. But that is the point of the operation. It's meant to entice you with deceit, never deliver, and the solution is always you didn't do it right. You didn't do it correctly. It's your fault. You didn't get the thing as advertised. They never admit that you would never get the thing as advertised. See, the woke program went through iterations of promising things and never actually delivering. And then as people started realizing what's going on, they started leaving the woke corral. Right? They started realizing, this sucks. They were leaving. And this is where the transition happened, where the system realized they had to actually enforce this thing because trying to entice people doesn't work. Because what woke is selling sucks. It sucks. So they realized that you can't package a turd any better than the best packaging you can package a turd. I mean, people eventually realize it's a turd. So this is where the transition happened, where the regular courts were not enough to enforce woke ideology or to be the enforcers of woke ideology against their political opponents. That's why in the place called Canada, they created the human rights tribunals to specifically destroy the enemies of the woke leftist. And even the idea of leftist, I mean, what's so funny is the concept of left and right. The leftists even lie about that. See, leftists say, oh, if you're on the right, you're a Nazi. It's like, what's a Nazi? A Nazi was a socialist Democrat. See how funny that is? See, on the far left is communism. If you think of it as a spectrum, on the far left is communism, which is absolute state control, zero personal autonomy. On the far right is zero state control, 100% autonomy. That is the spectrum of left versus right. So on the right, you have absolute freedom. On the left, you have no freedom. That's the spectrum. But the leftists try to pretend, no, the spectrum is only a narrow band on the far left, which is communism on the far left, and to the right of communism is fascism, and a little bit further than that, so there's communism on the far left, and there's fascism, then Nazism. That's the spectrum they try to claim, but the spectrum band they're talking about is on the far left. It's all three of those things is total government control, except minor deviations. As an example, communist was total government control, zero promise of autonomy for the people. The socialist was a combination of government control and corporate control together, ruling everything with zero personal freedom. And then the Nazis, that was nationalist socialist. That was socialist. It was democratic socialist, they call it, because they claimed that people voted socialism into effect rather than having a revolution, right? That was the nuance. So they claimed that the Nazis were socialist Democrats. And then whenever they claim you're a Nazi, it's funny because you're still on the way far left, because the Nazis were socialists. They just pretended to vote themselves into place. And then from that point on, you did not have any autonomy in Nazi Germany. There was a certain element of autonomy where people, if you got away from the government, you could be all right. But as soon as you were near the government demanded full compliance and control of you, and your full participation, or off to the punishment you go. And they didn't even bother a lot with the concentration camps. Mostly they just killed you if you were a problem, because they would just eliminate the problem immediately. And they didn't even bother with the premise of courts and things like that. I mean, anyway, so the spectrum the leftists talk about is this little ghostly spectrum in the far left that all sucks. But they say that their political enemies are Nazis. It's like, how is it possible if someone's a Nazi when they want no government control? I mean, the idea of no government control and Nazi are antithetical. They're the opposites. Anyways, the whole history of Nazi Germany is complicated and nuanced, and I have several podcasts on that as well. Anyways, the point is that the leftists lie, cheat, and steal. What they're selling sucks. And their packaging is getting more revealed because when they first started selling certain concepts, people thought, oh, maybe, And then the ones who thought maybe realized, no, that sucks too. And they started running out of the willing participation of the crowd. And this is when the human rights tribunals were brought in to really destroy and put the fear of the state into the enemies of the left. Because anyone who knows anybody who's been part of these human rights tribunals knows that their life just gets destroyed. Once you're thrown into the sinkhole, the quicksand of a human rights tribunal, there's no escaping it. Because this is a state-enforced edifice that is run by leftist ideologies. That the leftist ideology has no reference point. There's no such thing as male and female as a binary in this place. I mean, the fine that just happened was for a guy who refused to let go of objective reality that there's male and female, and that's it. You're born with an innie or an outie, and you become a big version of that, and that's the reality. But he was fined $750,000 for making this claim that is objectively true and provable. You can do a blood test, if someone's a male or a female. It's a blood test. This is simple, objective reality, provable. But he's being fined for not taking the knee to the woke ideology that says there is no such thing as male and female. Unless you're pursuing gender-affirming care, and the only genders that are affirmed are the opposite genders of birth, which means that if you're born with an outie, they never affirm that you're a boy. They only affirm that you're a girl. And if you're born with a ninny, they never affirm you're a girl, they always affirm you're a boy. It's the opposite of reality. And this is the woke ideology that's so destructive. And when it was just people posting on social media and doing demonstrations and making themselves look like morons, because they are, I mean, they can change, they can stop being morons and come back to sensible, but they're not. They're actually pushing forward this ideology that's insane. It's ghoulish. It destroys these children's lives. And most of these children who actually go through this thing are being led by teachers and guidance counselors and psychologists and even their woke parents that are trying to get woke points on social media to get extra credits for being woke by destroying these children. They're willing to sacrifice these children for their own personal gains. It is so wrong on so many levels, it's astounding. And they needed the human rights tribunals to enforce this thing because the courts lacked the ability to just ignore reality and push forward with a woke ideology that is completely antithetical to reason and logic. And the courts were still holding on to the idea of reason and logic to maintain their own credibility. See, the courts are necessary for the government to maintain credibility and to exhaust people so that the government is not overthrown. The idea that you're going to be able to find justice in the courts to go against the government is a pipe dream that's been created by the government so that you never actually overthrow the government. That's the point, is the system stays in control while people get exhausted trying to make a difference only when they use the channels that are given to them by the system that is destroying their lives. The thing is it's a labyrinth you're never allowed to escape. And if you even talk about doing something that escapes the labyrinth, you're considered a terrorist terrorizing the government. And then they do all kinds of things to you. This is the amazing thing. Until you understand this history and understand what's going on, these woke human rights tribunals are there to destroy the enemies of the left, because the left is the government at this point. The government is overtly leftist. The Canadian government has killed 100,000 people at this point by way of MAID, medical assistance in dying. This is a state-assisted suicide program. Canada has taken the lead as the most number of people killed per year than any other country. They're taking the lead in that by leaps and bounds. And what's amazing is when the MAID program started, it was meant to be, very rare. It's safe and effective. Very rare, just like abortion. It's very similar wording. Very rare, safe and effective. And then eventually, once they got on the books and it was legal because of the Kevorkian cases and all these different cases that made it sound like he was actually saving people's lives by killing them, right? When all this propaganda went through, finally they made it legal, and it was legal. Safe and rare. Safe and rare. Yeah, totally safe and rare. And then expanded and expanded and expanded. It went from like a dozen people a year to now 100,000 people have been killed by MAID, and they're accelerating because they're widening the qualifications. Now, if you're poor, you can qualify for MAID. You don't want to live anymore? Here, good for you. Sign up to MAID and die. Why are these people getting killed? Because the system is destroying those people with the idea of Western ideology, which is the idea of freedom, the idea that they have God-granted right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. These are ideologies that have been ingrained in the people in the West, and these are the individuals that are being targeted for MAID, not foreigners, not the replacements. See, the replacements going to Canada are foreigners that do not have this ideology, so they're easily threatened by the government that if you don't do what you're told, you're going to be deported. See, a local has no fear of being deported because they were born there. That fear does not work on them. But a foreigner, the fear of deportation is a means of control. On top of that, foreigners did not grow up in the ideological soup of the idea of freedom. See, most people in Canada have this idea that they grew up in the United States, except better. And they don't seem to understand that most of the ideas of the United States, the idea of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, those are ideas from the original Republic of the United States. They do not exist in the States right now. They haven't for 100 years. And the people in Canada falsely believe that they have these rights as well, and they don't. What's amazing is the people in Canada are so far from reality, yet that they're close enough to reality that to be a threat to the system, and that's why the system wants to destroy the locals, the local-born people. It doesn't matter what color you are. If you're local-born with a local ideology, you are slated for death. And this is the thing that people don't seem to wrap their minds around. This has nothing to do with racism. It has everything to do with destroying an ideology that is the ideology that will resist absolute tyranny. Leftists love tyranny. They love power. They love being in a position of power to tell other people what to do. And it's just a sickness. So anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. Otherwise I'll keep going. But this human rights tribunals in Canada is a woke enforcement mechanism that's being expanded right now. This is meant to put the fear into people who are just telling the truth. That if you tell the truth, if you think you're telling the truth and you're not saying what the government tells you to say, you're going to get a $750 fine and probably go to jail forever. This is the kind of thing. This is the human rights tribunals can actually do that to people. They put people in jail for simply telling the truth. I mean, this is so far from reasonable, and most people have no idea because the media is bought off and paid for by the Canadian government that is being completely tyrannical, manipulating the media and social media. Now they're bringing in censorship laws to make it so you can't even find anything out on the internet, because the major platforms that allow for people to speak freely are going to be censored, self-censoring, so as to avoid the fines by the Canadian government. And we're getting to the point where it's not going to be just a fine anymore. It's going to be the no-hide laws that are being brought in right now by the Canadian government. There's a bill now called Bill C9. It's very confusing because every year they start at zero again. They go up the bill list. Anyways, this bill is to bring in absolute censorship and control of individual thought. And if you do anything that offends the powerful, they're going to be able to do this thing called seizure. Seizure is where they just pick you up. And then there's disposal as a second part. And the disposal could be death or it could be something else. And it's undefined in the law. And the way that this has been written is so that once this is put in the books and it's decided that you need to be seized, the seizure of you means that you're no longer considered human and you're actually property that can be disposed of by the state, which means you can be organ harvested or sold into slavery or just had your head cut off and with the guillotine in the courtyard. I mean, this is how serious we're at, right? And people have no idea because the government is controlling the media and controlling social media. And there's so many paid activists by the government that are confusing things so that people don't see it coming. There's a sucker punch coming that's a deadly one, and the government is doing everything they can to hide it in plain sight so that they can sucker you and kill you. I mean, this is how serious it is. These human rights tribunals are another thing that's distracting people, and it's a wake-up call to realize how evil the government can be. And many just are too distracted and can't see it. I'm going to wrap it up there, otherwise I keep adding stuff. We will close with a prayer. God, please move the hearts of the listeners. Move them in the spirit as only you can, to be better, choose more, and be examples of what you intend your children to be. Remind us in ways that only you can, that we are the children of God. We have free will. We are co-creators of this beautiful world that you gifted to us, and we will have abundance if we but choose to, and act to manifest it. God, give them a vision of how they can fulfill their destiny as individuals here and now. We ask that you inspire us to be fearless warriors in spirit and the sword, to be shining examples of what we can do with our divine potential. Fear not, fear not, fear not. We ask that we manifest unwavering courage, the conviction and the heart to live a life worth living, and to do our part to manifest a godly realm, full of peace and love and abundance, here and now. We claim our space as holy. In the name of Jesus Christ, we put on the armor of God and we pick up the sword of the Spirit. We will act to expand the kingdom. We will manifest goodness in this world. We say these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, that's it. I'm going to wrap up the podcast there, keeping a short ending because this is getting kind of long in the tooth. I think I said a lot of things that should be able to open people's minds. They can go look into this, start checking it. And remember, if you're going through the regular internet, you'll never find anything of use on the general internet these days. You have to go through alternative internets or go to websites that are actually cataloging reality. And if you don't actually know how to get out of the loop of false reality, you're just going to be doom looped into there. So you have to find this out for yourself. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for listening. It's all for now. God bless.